A new working paper from a Harvard economist recently came out advocating that central banks should protect themselves by hedging against United States sanctions. And the even bigger surprising thing about this is that it recommended the use of Bitcoin and gold to do so. Now, especially at the beginning of 2022, when Russia first invaded Ukraine, myself and many others were talking about sanctions by the United States and that they are potentially a fantastic weapon that eventually backfires and stops being useful once you use them. The reason for this is because if you force somebody to stop using the US dollar as a punishment, well, eventually other people might get scared that they won't be able to have access to their dollars. And it might mean that other people stop using their dollars proactively, which would mean that by you forcing people to stop using dollars in the future, nobody cares because nobody wants to use them anymore anyway. And it looks like it's not just crazy conspiracy theorists on the internet that are talking about this, because now there's this new working paper from a Harvard economist. Let's take a look at who this guy is. This guy is Matthew Ferranti, a fifth-year PhD candidate in Harvard's economics department, and he's an advisee of Ken Rogoff. Ken Rogoff is one of the co-authors of This Time is Different by Kenneth Rogoff and Carmen Reinhart. Talks about the last 800 years of financial folly and how the same thing happens over and over again. He's a widely acclaimed economist. In this paper, Ferranti argues that many central banks should hold a small amount of Bitcoin and much more Bitcoin if they face sanction risks. On top of that, his analysis found that gold was even more useful as a sanctions hedge. Now, he was recently interviewed, and some of the bits from the interview are posted in a Politico article. I'll read to you here a few of these questions and answers because they're quite surprising coming from this source. First of all, they found that while people talk about how dangerous sanctions might be, the numbers come back that, it's actually a concern. Sanctions could absolutely come back and bite us, and it is a big deal. And I absolutely just love the follow-up question to that. Rather than hedging sanctions risk with Bitcoin, shouldn't governments just avoid doing bad things? It's like the famous quote, first they came for the socialists, I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, I did not speak out, I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, there's no one left to speak for me. It's like you do not combat the abuse of power by just falling in line. That's not how it works. In fact, many times, falling in line allows the increase of the abuse of power. So I hear this all the time. I don't care that the government's tracking my phone. I don't care that government's listening to everything I say. I don't care that government tracks everything that I spend money on. I don't care if they have a CBDC because I've got nothing to hide. I'm not doing anything wrong. But guess what? What happens when something that you are doing that's not morally wrong becomes illegal and they want to stop it? You spent your entire life saying they can have all this access and all the potential to abuse this power, and the moment that abuse turns against you, there'll be nothing left you can do about it. And don't just think that these sanctions are things that happen to other countries. Sanctions are what happen to individuals in this country. It's just called the Patriot Act and anti-money laundering laws and the IRS seizing your assets and freezing your accounts. But as he points out, that it might make countries pause and think, well, how reliable is the US? Because the reality is it is a little bit nebulous. Meaning a country might look at this and think, hey, I'm not doing anything that would cause me to get sanctioned right now, but what if something that I'm doing in the future would cause me to get sanctioned? Well, I might want to hedge myself against that risk at least a little bit. Now, regarding Bitcoin versus gold, they found that gold was a more useful hedge, mostly because of how less volatile it is. So from a purchasing power perspective and the total value not changing as frequently and as to as much of an extent as Bitcoin, gold serves a better role. But Bitcoin would come in because there's diversification since their values are not correlated, and some countries don't have access to the gold, to the storage of the gold, or the ability to buy enough gold. And so something like Bitcoin could be a fantastic tool for countries that fits the bill for. And the final question here was about what he would tell the president president regarding sanctions in terms of advice, and he said that he would try and put concreteness on the nebulousness of how we apply sanctions. Because if sanctions can be applied to any country at any time for any reason, then the potential for the abuse of that power is much greater and would provide a much greater advantage to any country that is able to hedge that risk and store up assets that cannot be sanctioned, like Bitcoin and gold. And it's important to remember here that the gold is only a hedge against sanctions if the country holds the gold themselves. We see countries like Venezuela that hold their gold in the UK, not going to be the best sanction hedge when they go to get it, and the UK just says, no, you can't have it because you're a dictator. And as with the collapse of FTX recently, we know that not your keys, not your coins. But the key takeaway here for individuals looking at this is that big money is starting to look at this. The people, the economists, the Harvard economists that central banks typically listen to around the world, they are now saying, hey, it's a good idea, selfishly, for you to hedge your risk against you not being able to use the dollar. And if central banks are looking at this, individuals should definitely be looking at this. You've got to get some wealth outside the banking system, outside the financial system, so that if the day ever comes, when push comes to shove, then you can't access your dollars. The banks shut down, the ATM limits shut off, your debit card and credit card don't work, you can still have purchasing power. You can make a transaction that nobody can stop. It is important because if the big boys, the central banks, other countries are looking at this because they're concerned, how much more power can the government in your own country exercise over you? And if you're interested in my step-by-step plan for how to incorporate Bitcoin and gold and other hedges into your portfolio in order to bulletproof your entire portfolio, get my portfolio allocation mastery course linked in the description below. For a very limited time, I've got it on sale for half off for the holidays for you. Special inflation bonus for you here, cutting the price to help ease the bills. That discount link is in the description below. As always, really appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.